What's going on, guys? Welcome inside Take to Take. Patrick Tallon here, as always, joined alongside Luke Burrows, Nick Robinson. And NHL season is underway. We had a couple games last night, and we couldn't wait another week to dissect it, so I want to get into it right away. Before we do, Nick, Luke, how are we doing today?
Good,
Tonight,
Patrick.
I should say. It's almost 9 p.m., so.
Yeah, I'm doing good. Good to have hockey back, and I'm excited to talk some actual real live NHL hockey here for the first time in what feels like
I
forever.
haven't thought about that. It's true.
Yeah, it's the first. Well, how many days was that? I don't know, but it's been a long time. Yeah, a couple months, and we had a hard time in the off season stretching out content. But it's day one, and there's already drama. And before we get into the games itself, let's talk about a tweet from Nick Kypreos. He tweeted, and let's take it with a grain of salt, kind of with all due respect to Kypreos. He did tweet last year that Shea Weber might retire, and then Weber came back a day later. So before we say it, let's just remember that. He tweeted, Pierre-Luc Dubois' first destination choice is the Montreal Canadiens. The Blue Jackets' ask is now focused around Nick Suzuki plus. Romanov has been deemed untouchable. Would you do it if you were Marc Bergevin? So this was talked about a couple weeks ago before Pierre-Luc Dubois signed his bridge deal, 2 years, $5 million, and now he wants out. And I was actually listening to TSN 690 this morning, and they were talking about how John Tortorella went on Columbus radio and was saying, yep, he wants out. It's really hard for me to coach a guy knowing he doesn't want to be here, but at least he's honest, and I kind of wished he was more honest. And he kind of went on to say how it's really hard to coach someone when you know they want out. So that much is clear. He wants out. If that's this year or if it's in 2 years when his contract is up, still remains to be seen. But let's talk about this for a little bit, because it seems to be Montreal. I know Winnipeg was another one that was interested. What would Montreal have to give up to get Pierre-Luc Dubois?
Yeah, well, I don't know. But to answer your first question, if you were Marc Bergevin, would you do it? Probably not. And that's hard to say because he's a great hockey player. But Montreal, at least from my perspective, and I'm assuming you kind of support me as a Habs fan here, Pat, Montreal doesn't really need to do that right now. Montreal is far from perfect, but I think forward depth and center depth is not their area of concern. So yeah, I don't know what the trade would be. So I'm obviously not gonna comment on that necessarily. But I just think if I were Montreal, I don't have a huge desire to go out and get someone like Dubois.
All right, Nick, what do you think?
Well, it depends what the asking price is starting with for me.
Yeah.
Columbus isn't just going to give a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois away. They're going to obviously seek a massive return for him. That return could start with somebody like a Nick Suzuki or even a Jesperi Kotkaniemi. And we know that Pierre-Luc Dubois is a one-line center. That is, at least in my opinion, at this point, is a fact. And when you're talking about sort of that return for him and what you're going to be giving up, it really depends how highly you value Kotkaniemi and Suzuki if you are Montreal. Yes, they both have the potential to probably be a one-line center, but how sure are you of that? You're trading essentially a mystery box that could be better or worse than Pierre-Luc Dubois for a guaranteed one-line center, which we know the Montreal Canadiens famously have not had in quite a long time. They always thought maybe somebody like Jonathan Drouin was going to be the next French-Canadian superstar of the team. Well, you also have one here that fills that 1C role as well. I can see the appeal for Montreal, but it really depends how highly you value some of those prospects in your system.
Yeah, so apparently Bergevin has been talking to all GMs are talking, and I think whenever people talk about this trade, it's going to come down to Suzuki or Kotkaniemi. Romanov has to be untouchable. Montreal has depleted their mobile defensemen over the last 5 years. Romanov, you have to keep. So out of those two, I'd have a hard time trading either because I still think there's potential with Kotkaniemi, despite Pierre-Luc Dubois being the better player. I'm not moving Suzuki for Pierre-Luc Dubois at all. I still think Suzuki will be a better hockey player. Suzuki, you can call this bias. You can call me overreacting. I do think he has superstar potential, and I mean that. I do think 70 to 80 points is probable with him. The question mark is Kotkaniemi, and you look at Jarmo Kekalainen. He likes his Finnish players. He could see someone like Jesperi Kotkaniemi on the move. The other one, and I don't think this is going to happen, but just because I've seen it thrown out there, is moving Philip Deneau, whose point totals are similar to Pierre-Luc Dubois. He's a two-way player who works well under Torts, but I can't see Montreal doing that. You'd have to throw in a Caulfield a couple firsts at least. So we'll see. If I'm Montreal, it's like, if you move on from one of those centers, you get Pierre-Luc Dubois. What's the quarantine period? Is it 14 days? Are you going 14 days without a center and then waiting for that next one to come in? I don't know. It's a lot of talk. And the other one that we want to talk about was Laine. And
I think he just scored, didn't he?
He did just score.
Yes, he has just scored.
Apparently, it was a nice
hockey
goal.
on right now.
Yes. There are rumors that Winnipeg's interested, and I don't think center is the need for.
Oh, sorry.
Or what?
Continue. Sorry, I thought you said Winnipeg is interested in Laine. Continue.
Well, the Laine saga in Winnipeg has been weird, but say you do that swap, Kekalainen gets a finished player in Laine, and the Jets get another dominant center in Pierre-Luc Dubois. Do you guys see that a fit? And I feel like I don't. I'll start because I can't imagine Patrick Laine not playing defense for John Tortorella. It doesn't make a lot of sense for me. We know John Tortorella and Pierre-Luc Dubois didn't work, which is weird. And we've seen this before. Nick, we saw it with Anthony Duclair. He criticized him a ton, and then he scores 20 goals, gets a hat trick against Columbus. Do you guys think this is a Pierre-Luc Dubois issue, or do you think it's a John Tortorella issue?
I would probably point towards saying it's more a Torts issue. Again, we can't really comment too much because we don't know the specifics of what's going on there. But I would more so assume that this is something to do with Tortorella and management in general, just because, like you said, Patrick, it's something we've seen before in the past with players that have played under Tortorella. You know, Luke, you can maybe speak to it even. That year that he coached in Vancouver, it almost felt like at times players were so split in that dressing room and in the media because nobody knew where they really stood under Tortorella, and the heavy criticism. Yes, it's a lot to deal with. We know Torts is like a proven quality NHL head coach. He's won a lot of things in this league, but you know, he does have a knack for getting under players' skin in the wrong way, and especially somebody young like Pierre-Luc Dubois, somebody who has the potential to be a franchise star for Columbus. That's not somebody you want to be, you know, pissing off at this point in his career. So I would assume it's probably something to do with Tortorella.
It's hard to.
Torts was a. I was going to say, because Torts was a coach in Vancouver. Was there any, I don't remember because that was a long time ago. Was there any of that in Vancouver when you were a fan?
I can't think of any specific like player situation. I could be wrong. Those were the dark days, though. We don't like to think about those.
Fair enough.
It's hard to say that, but it's hard to totally kind of blame it on Tortorella because, like Nick said, he has proven himself to be, at some points over his career, one of the best coaches in the league. He's consistently in Jack Adams conversations. Like he's a really good coach. So, I mean, not to kind of escape from the debate, but maybe it's neither of the two parties' faults. Again, like Nick said, we don't know. No one. That's kind of the whole point. No one knows what Dubois is wanting out for. So it's hard to say, assuming it's some kind of conflict with Tortorella, which wouldn't be surprising. Maybe it's no one's fault. I'm sure not everyone can play under that kind of style, but I don't want to say Dubois as an NHL player should be able to. If Tortorella wasn't an established coach, I mean, he probably wouldn't be in this position anyways, but he is. So it's kind of hard for me at least to kind of put the blame on him when he's kind of done what he's done.
Yeah, it's a weird situation. We don't have to touch too much on it. I just thought, you know, it's day one after Montreal plays Toronto, and there is a ton of talk already on Twitter about Pierre-Luc Dubois. I like the idea. I would just be wary if I'm Bergevin. I could probably swallow trading Kotkaniemi for him. I probably couldn't with Nick Suzuki. I think Suzuki will be the better player. He's 21 years old and he's already playing amazing. So anyway, let's move on and let's talk about Montreal because they played Toronto last night and the Leafs won 5-4 in overtime. Honestly, like, it sucks when the Habs lose, but for me, it was just a fun game. Happy hockey is back. That was really entertaining. I think the rivalry is going to get really bitter very soon. Standouts for me were Nylander and Tavares. Not standouts on Toronto was Bogosian because he was playing how everyone knows Bogosian.
Stand out for the wrong reasons.
Exactly. Nick, what were your thoughts on this game? And obviously you're being a Sens fan. Ottawa plays them pretty soon. What did you think of this historic game?
Well, obviously, if that game was any indication of what's to come, not only between those two teams, but the entire North Division this year, then I think we're going to be in for some pretty exciting hockey. It was a great contest between the two. Montreal, you thought sort of they were going to run away with it at some point in the second period. Toronto really started to look down and out at points in the second, especially when Montreal was able to extend their lead. But, silly penalties and a couple of mistakes allowed Toronto to catch up and get back into the game from Montreal. So you're probably going to want to look for better game management from Montreal as the season progresses. But, it is game 1 out of 56. They've still got a lot to go. Everybody's still getting readjusted to playing. One thing that really sticks out for me and on the Toronto side is, Frederik Andersen struggling again last night. We've seen this from him throughout his time in Toronto. We've seen it from him throughout his career. He really, really struggles in the first month or two of the season. And in a shortened season this year with such a condensed schedule, I don't know that he can afford to do that. We'll see what happens this weekend. 2 games against the Senators. He's pretty much guaranteed to play one, if not both. I'd assume Campbell starts one of them. But Fred Andersen is guaranteed another game this weekend. We're going to have to see what he brings to the table there, because Toronto can't really afford to be giving up 4 goals a game to teams and, expecting to outscore them like that.
As someone that, Nick doesn't have any skin in the game either, but as Sens fans a bit more involved. I watched the game off and on. It was a very entertaining game. Patrick, I will be honest. I thought Montreal looked all right. I thought Suzuki.
Hey, whoa. Hang on. Do not mumble. And when you mean all right, do you mean good?
I thought Suzuki looked okay.
Pardon?
Josh Anderson was all right. Suzuki looked really good. I'll be honest about that. I knew he was good in the playoffs, but he looked pretty good. Josh Anderson scored 2 goals, which is that happened last night. I will say, there's probably some bias there. I kind of had an eye out for Kotkaniemi as well. I wasn't blown away, but it was an exciting game nonetheless. I think I feel like that is exactly what happens in like every single Leafs Habs game. It's something exactly like that. That was I don't know. That was exciting to see on opening night. That was a good way to bring it in. But I realized this when the game ended, as a division member now with the Leafs and the Habs,
of course,
that was not an ideal finish for a Canucks fan. And same for you, Nick, if the Sens are to make a run. 3-point games are not what I want to see. So that's a new interesting dynamic for all of us.
Yeah, very big of you, Luke. I'm really glad you said that. I know.
Well, yeah, we're getting to Vancouver, Edmonton shortly, so I'm assuming it'll come back the other way.
I would agree. I don't know about you guys, and I know we love to make fun of them. I'm not doing this just to do it, but I didn't think Toronto looked that good. Bogosian, I thought, was unbelievably terrible. Simmons fought, and I know people think that's why Toronto won. Never mind the fact that Montreal took 2 penalties. Anderson didn't look good. I didn't notice Joe Thornton on the top line. I was very impressed with Nylander and Tavares, but overall, I thought the Leafs looked pretty weak.
And Sean Keefe did say today they will be keeping the same lineup at least for Friday against the Senators. So, we're going to see what Zach Bogosian does, if he can rebound, maybe against a lesser team in Ottawa, a team that's not as deep offensively. We'll see what they're able to do, if they're able to contain that better. But if not, then I think we're going to quickly see that become an issue or some sort of storyline in Toronto.
Yeah, I think, look, I understand Bogosian has a lot more NHL experience than Lettinen, but you might want to give that guy a chance. Nick Robertson, he was pulled out of the World Juniors in part because of COVID precautions, but also because he was expected to make the Leafs team and he hasn't. And maybe you want to put someone like him in the lineup. But let me ask real quick, just because I was super excited to see him. Romanov had his debut. Did you guys think he was good?
Yeah, he looked great. Looked outstanding. You see what all the hype's about immediately from him. And, maybe if performances like that continue again, it's only game 1, but, maybe he'll start to put himself in the Calder conversation.
Yeah, I thought he looked all right.
God. Luke's Vancouver homer behavior. Anyway, let's talk about Vancouver because they played Edmonton and they won. I watched the first period and a bit. I saw Horvat's goal, and then I found out later that Hoglander scored, which is super cool because I love watching him in Europe. Besser had 2 goals, and Gaudette scored as well. Luke, I'm going to ask you because I didn't watch the game. How did Vancouver look early on?
They looked sustainable is a word I would use. They didn't look awesome, which isn't really what I would have expected, but they looked consistent and there weren't any glaring holes, which I'm kind of okay with because they don't have a superstar roster. They have a lot of they do have a lot of holes when you look at their lineup, but last night it was pretty consistent all around, and they shut down pretty well, in my opinion, the best player in the league, one of the best lines in the league. I was pretty happy. Holtby looked good. Demko's in tonight, so I'm all for a goalie tandem battle. I don't know, one game, but I have positive expectations.
Nick?
Yeah, and I think last night showed what Vancouver's going to need all season. They're going to need depth guys to step up, like Gaudette to score. They're going to need Hoglander to make some sort of a smooth transition into the NHL. Again, he looked good yesterday, and Holtby looked good in his debut, and they're going to need strong goaltending. We talked a lot about that in our preview show. Vancouver's going to need, a lot of different guys to step up this year to sort of make up for some of their losses in the offseason. And, one game in and, they got those things. So we'll see how that translates over a longer period of time. But overall, I would say it was a good start for Vancouver. And, it's going to hopefully give that group confidence right away.
I don't know if you guys are seeing, but do yourself a favor and look at Pettersson's pass on one of Besser's goal. Pretty out of this world. He didn't score last night, but like it's a subtle thing, but like tape to tape, it just I don't know if you've seen it.
I've said despite McDavid being the best player in the world, I do find Pettersson the most entertaining player to watch because of the stuff he tries. He has these subtle little dekes and moves that blow me away every single time. That he
does in like real game situations, which is insane.
Oh, and I will say too on Besser, now that you mentioned him, 2 goals last night, that's going to be big for him because there was that little bit of concern last year that he was cooling off a little bit, but to start off with 2 goals this year, I think that's going to be big for him confidence-wise.
I don't know if I said this on Sunday, but apparently he was looking really good in training camp, like first year Besser with his shot back, and he absolutely proved last night he has his shot back, which you are correct, Nick. That will be huge for Vancouver.
Must have been practicing with Mitch Marner. Anyhow, let's touch on the Ottawa Senators. Nick, they haven't played yet. They're playing tomorrow against Toronto. It's a home and home.
Last team to play. Got robbed.
You didn't get to experience the bubble, and then you had to wait this length. The season starts, and they don't play for 2 days. Anyway, they are playing, and they made their final roster, and Logan Brown is not a part of it. Logan Brown, look, I didn't know a lot about prospects back when that pick was made. I think it was 9th overall. Is that right?
11th overall, 2016.
He was a big guy, and a lot of people thought he was really good because he was big. But then you had people saying, no, he actually has some skill and he's big. He's not just someone that old school GMs like. He hasn't made the team as it looks like right now, and that's kind of upset a lot of Sens fans, and you can speak to it. Is he done with Ottawa? What do you think's happening with them and Logan Brown? You'd think in a rebuild like right now with Stützle getting the opportunity, bringing in someone like Galchenyuk, Josh Norris is playing 1C. Why not give the opportunity to Logan Brown? And do you think he's done in Ottawa?
Well, it's concerning when you look at it, no matter which way you slice it right now with Logan Brown. This is his 5th camp as an NHL hockey player now. He's only made it out of camp once, and that was in his 2nd year when the team was still under Guy Boucher. And, when we were looking ahead towards the offseason for Ottawa and when we were doing shows sort of right after the playoff ended, I was always saying that Ottawa, no matter which way you looked at it in the offseason, they just had to make sure that there were spots open for guys like Norris and Brown automatically. With all the offseason moves they made, and especially the later one, bringing in Stepan and essentially plugging up another hole at center, it was pretty evident that there was going to be one spot available for Norris and Brown to battle it out. And I wrote about it for Fansided how the two of them were really going to battle it out. And I totally, admittedly expected Logan Brown to get that because, like you said, Pat, he always had that big frame. But I think a lot of people sort of noticed, especially after he was drafted, that the big frame wasn't really even part of his game. It was all his skill, and that's why a lot of people liked him. And in the AHL, he's been a dominant player, at least the past couple of years, but he just hasn't been able to make that step up. But it is upsetting watching the team, knowing he's probably better than players like Stepan and Anisimov easily. However, he just hasn't earned that trust of his coaches yet. And I wouldn't be surprised if the two sides split here now. Logan Brown's not getting any younger. This is sort of the time by now we would have expected him to be making an impact in the NHL. And he's just not been able to do it here. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's looking for a fresh start.
Luke, when you look at this Ottawa roster, do you think they brought in too many veterans for what's supposed to be sort of a rebuild right now?
Well, I mean, what is too many? Because I think that's kind of a super important part of any rebuild, and you can only throw in so many young up and comers. Like, exposure is great, but you've got to, like, you can't underestimate development. So I can't speak to Ottawa's prospect pool and development process, but no, I wouldn't say they've brought in too many veterans, because I'm sure that was a balanced decision to make. And I don't know their contract length or anything, but no major commitment. I don't really think it's an issue. If anything, it's a good thing, unless they're taking up, and I guess in this case, maybe that's the case, but unless they're taking up younger players' ice time, I don't really have an issue with it.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing I'd point to is, somebody like Rudolph Balcers, who they lost on waivers going back to San Jose this week. That's a guy whose spot you thought would have been guaranteed looking ahead at the offseason, but now they're giving it to, players who are automatically, we know, worse in Austin Watson. I think that's something that's going to upset Senators fans, and hopefully it's something they solve here, because I get wanting to buff your squad out for the taxi squad. Pat, you can speak to it. Montreal's done it, obviously. They've got a lot of bodies now around their team, a lot of guys at that NHL level. But, in Ottawa's case now, they've got a lot of these guys, but it's still blocking what's supposed to be a young team.
Yeah, that's the thing, is a lot of Montreal's, I guess, top prospects made the team, finally Romanov, and it's hard to say what I would expect from Romanov, and maybe that can excuse why they brought in Edmonton as insurance in case the hype that Montreal gave Romanov didn't work out. But no, I think while it might be good to have Logan Brown up there, Stepan, at least Stützle gets some veteran presence instead of, maybe you wouldn't want Stützle and Logan Brown on the same line, and then Dadonov, who's coming from a completely different team. But I don't know, you look at that bottom six, I think he can start on the wing and slowly move in, integrate his way into the middle. And that'll lead me to my next question, Nick, about the Sens. Colin White signed a 6-year deal last year, and he is set to be a scratch on the opening night tomorrow night against the Leafs. What's going on in Ottawa? Just give it to me straight.
Yeah, it's interesting because he did sign that big deal, and that's a big deal for Ottawa. A 6-year contract in Vancouver and Montreal is not the same thing as it is in Ottawa because of their lack of I would say, I'm trying to find a good word for it. They're almost scared half the time to give out big money to players over term. And we've seen that in the past with some of the players that they've let go and some of the guys that have come through in the past couple of years. So giving that contract to Colin White was a big signal of intent. But I don't know if it's message related, maybe they didn't like his camp so much that he was having. But either way, you cannot have guys like Stepan and Anisimov, Watson playing ahead of Colin White. Colin White is here for the long term, whether you like it or not now. And that's a player you should be nurturing instead of obviously just trying to send a message to. So hopefully it's not more than just a one-game thing because, when you're on that type of a deal, comes expectation from the fans and management. And fans expect to see a guy like Colin White in the lineup every night because he's proven he is a good NHL player.
Right. That's kind of what Bergevin does a lot of the time is he is more willing to trade for and then extend someone else's players rather than extend his own. He seems very hesitant to extend players he drafted. He did it when he traded for Drouin. did it when he traded for Domi, and then obviously Domi for Anderson, who he then signed. It's interesting, but I am excited to watch Ottawa play. I do think they're going to surprise people. Yeah, they're still the worst team, but they're still going to be pretty good. So let's touch on this thing one last time, and we could not talk about it because when do we pass up an opportunity to make fun of the Maple Leafs? TSN tweeted today, the Maple Leafs say they would like to see cross checks to the back in front of the net called more often. I think that's a reasonable take. I just think it's funny that it's coming from Toronto. What do you guys think about this?
You can't really argue with that, but it's just how it goes. I could go on at length, and I'm sure I have at some points about the abuse that Pettersson gets in front of the net and elsewhere. Just a fact of the game, and I know a lot of last night was what Matthews was getting. I don't know. Sure, yeah, it's a fair complaint, but to make it, after the first game of the season, and to I don't know. It's just it bothers me that's kind of what is in the news today, that the Leafs aren't happy with how their superstar is being treated. I just don't have the time for it.
And it's not. Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, this is something that we shouldn't be realizing right now. We've talked about this actually on our show multiple times, and we did back in the playoffs when, like Luke just mentioned, Elias Pettersson was receiving a lot of treatment like this from the Blues and the Golden Knights in the playoffs. And, we all voiced our own individual concerns on that throughout the playoffs and throughout episodes on the show. So I do think it's pretty funny that now, since Austin Matthews got a few cross-checks from Shea Weber, Ben Sherratt last night, that now all of a sudden we're talking about it. This isn't something we should be realizing now. This is something that a lot of people have known about, us included, and have been talking about for quite a while. I don't disagree with what Toronto's saying. I, in fact, totally agree with it. They should be calling those penalties because there are penalties. I don't think it's just a hockey play because, again, you're injuring younger players purposely when you're an opposing team. And, we pay money as fans to go watch the big players like Matthews, like Pettersson. So it's not something we should be realizing now. But if this is what it takes to get attention, get change in terms of the rule, then I guess I'm all for it.
Yeah, I understand it. And I think all of our teams have more or less star players, or at least players that people want to see more than others. And it happened. That's why I said, Luke, don't give me that look. That's
I didn't say anything.
Players, some people want to see more than others. You look at Brendan Gallagher, who took a cross-check, broke his jaw from Matt Niskanen, took a ton of abuse in that playoff series. You look at it against Boston twice. Zdeno Chara blatantly cross-checked Gallagher right in the face. It happens to Pettersson. It happens to McDavid especially, and I think that's kind of why they have in part why they have Zach Kassian there. This is not a new thing. It's not specific to Toronto. I think it's good they brought it up, but I don't think it's not specific to Toronto, and it's not as if Toronto doesn't do it to the last night. That had all the cross checks Gallagher took, that Sherratt took from Toronto, some of their star players as well. So I understand the frustration. No one wants to get cross checked, but it is not specific to Toronto being the one that's taking abuse. We can see this here. We just pulled it up. There's three guys, technically, if you count Freddie, on Gallagher, a bunch of stuff. Anyway, this is kind of nitpicking, but I think we'd all be in agreement. But we're all in agreement. It's not specific to Toronto. It's any team, any good players are getting that treatment. It just shouldn't be a thing that we're talking about just now. Anyway, that does it for this. Episode 49. We're coming up on episode 50. We need to think of what we're going to do.
Hopefully it'll be live, but
hopefully it will be live. We're still trying to figure that out. But yeah, as far as hockey goes, Montreal plays Edmonton after the Ottawa-Toronto game. Nick, real quick, Ottawa has a home and home against Toronto. Who do you have coming out on top in those two games? And
I think they'll go 1-1 split. I think Ottawa's at least going to come out flying in opening night and might try and take at least a win in that one. But, obviously I can't, in all good heart, pick Ottawa to win both of them against Toronto, although as a fan, that would be very nice to see.
Luke, what is Vancouver's schedule looking like?
Actually, this time next week, they'll be handing it to Jesperi and the gang, as well as the night prior. So by next show, Vancouver and Montreal have maybe played.
All right. Well, Montreal plays Saturday against Edmonton, and then they move on to their 3-game stint against the Canucks, which I'm sure Luke and I will have a entertaining back and forth. But for those listening, thank you so much for tuning in to Take, and we will see you next week, hopefully live. Thanks, guys. Take it easy.